first, I wanted to just welcome everyone to today's virtual event, an artist panel. It's going to be held in conjunction with our current exhibition called Divine Legacies in Black Jewelry. And we're just so pleased to be joined by this incredible panel today for this conversation. And hopefully we should be joined by our curator, LaMar R. Gayles Jr. in a bit, but I'm going to go ahead and just proceed and kind of take over some of the asking, which is very exciting for me. But again, my name is Dorothy Swedick and I'm the museum's exhibitions coordinator. I'm joined today by Brooke Garcia, who you all heard from just recently, who's our collections and exhibitions manager, and she'll be tapping in and kind of doing some assisting over Zoom. So just some introduction to the exhibition. Divine Legacies in Black Jewelry explores the pluralistic histories of jewelry creation and production in the Black Diaspora of the Americas. This exhibition centers the works and lives of over 25 jewelry artists to present the first survey of the history of Black Diaspora jewelry of its kind. And while the artists represented in this exhibition have varying definitions of Black identity and conceptions of how their identities relate to their work, all of them identify as members of the Black diaspora in some way. And emphasizing recurring themes in the jewelry on exhibit, such as the use of symbols and cultural materials, metals, as well as gemstones and minerals, this exhibition reveals that while there are visual and conceptual similarities among these works, Black jewelry is not one type of object. And as such, we're so honored to be able to talk to some of the artists featured in the exhibition and hear about their experiences as jewelers and how they approach their craft. Before we really jump in, I'd just like to take a moment to acknowledge all of our supporters. Divine Legacies in Black Jewelry and related research were supported by a Craft Research Fund grant from the Center for Craft. So many thanks to the Center for Craft. The Metal Museum also receives operating support through Arts Memphis and the Tennessee Arts Commission, as well as exhibition and programming support through the Wingate Foundation and Hyde Family Foundation. Additional support for this exhibition comes from Patriot Bank, as well as John and Ann Stokes. Thank you so much to our sponsors for your continued support. And now Brooke and I would like to introduce our amazing panelists for today.
Neat. I will start off by just reading LaMar's introduction. He is the curator of Divine Legacies in Black Jewelry, and he will be moderating our artist panel today if he can make it on the call. He is an art historian, archaeogemologist, anthropologist of jewelry and gems, and a jeweler. He specializes in using artistic experiential practices, experimental archaeology, and historical reproduction to understand the visual rhetoric of artifacts from the past. He is a cum laude graduate of St. Olaf College, where he studied art history, ethnic studies, and ethno-aesthetic and archaeological materiality. This past spring, he graduated with a master's from the University of Illinois Chicago's Museum and Exhibition Studies program, while working as the executive director of Union Street Gallery. Gayles is set to begin a doctoral program in preservation studies and art conservation research at the University of Delaware. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Sandy Baker, our first artist on the panel today. Sandy has been creating her unique brand of bold sculptural fine jewelry since the late 1960s. She has always designed with today's woman in mind, creating timeless pieces that are both strikingly beautiful and seamlessly adaptable to the demands of the day. Selections from Sandy Baker's jewelry are in many renowned collections, including the Smithsonian Design Museum and the museum at the Fashion Institute of Technology. Baker's work appears in an array of books, including 500 Earrings, New Directions of Contemporary Jewelry, and Brilliance, Masterpieces of the American Jewelry Design Council. Sandy was named one of the top 100 American jewelry designers of the last 40 years by the Fine Trade Press. In the mid-1980s, Baker served as the vice president of the Women's Jewelry Association. Her contributions have been acknowledged by leading publications like the New York Times, Vogue, Glamour, Harper's Bazaar, and Essence. Sandy's work can be currently can currently be found in fine art settings like the Carnegie Museum and in luxury stores and galleries around the world. Welcome, Sandy. Thank you so much for being on our panel today.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here.
And I'm going to go ahead and introduce Richie Frazier. She is a Florida-born, Boston-based artist who practices in a variety of media, including performance, quilting, fibers, metal sculpture, and handmade jewelry. Frazier studied metals at the Museum School of Fine Arts and in Bahia, Brazil. Her work provocatively traverses the mediums of fiber, beads, metals, poetry, and performance, and work with the community. She serving as threads of memory, reclaimed from icons that bring recognition, salvation, redemption. Through her visual artwork, she creates and has lauded support and praise for her evocative fiber and metal sculptures, innovative mixed media installations, handcrafted bead jewelry, and powerful quilt series called Quilted Chronicles. Her jewelry is entitled Spirited Images and Pearls for Peace, which feature reclamation and memory in the African diaspora. She is also an educator and consultant and currently serves as the Director of Education at the Museum of African American History in Boston.
All right, so I'll keep our introductions rolling. And next I'd like to introduce Alicia Goodwin, who's a full-time Chicago-based jeweler who specializes in adding unique textures to her sculptural jewelry. With a background in cultural anthropology, as well as a degree in jewelry design from New York's Fashion Institute of Technology, Alicia applies her knowledge of ancient techniques like reticulation and acid etching to her more contemporary designs. Her love of complex-looking ceremonial jewelry created with minimal tools such as fire, sand, and beeswax led her to truly admire the work throughout the Mesoamericas and the African diaspora. She honed her unique style while working for dozens of major jewelry companies in the fashion industry in New York City, learning the business ins and outs during the day while creating at night. With almost 2 decades of experience under her belt and a decade of being an independent jeweler in her own right with her own eponymous brand, Lingua Negra, Alicia continues to fabricate new ways to explore bygone approaches to creating wearable art. Welcome, Alicia, to today's panel. We're happy to have you here.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And then last but not least, I'd like to introduce Charnell Holloway to everyone who's joined us today. Charnell Holloway has always been involved in the visual arts, music, specifically piano and dance. Influenced by her mother, artist Jenel C. Walden Holloway, Holloway eventually chose visual art as a major in Spelman College, concentrating in life drawing. After receiving her BA degree, she pursued jewelry design and silversmithing at Georgia State University. Her first course there was under Jem Frealdenhoven. Was that okay, Charnell?
Right.
Okay, good. Thank you. And eventually received her MFA in 1986 under designer metalsmith Richard Mathong. Holloway's work has been exhibited in such venues as the Mingay Museum, the Renwick Gallery, and the American Craft Museum. In addition, by invitation, she has been included in the African American archives of the Smithsonian's National Design Museum. Presently, Holloway is an associate professor of art at Spelman College. Welcome, Charnell.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, I'm so excited and grateful for all of you being with us today. For anyone who's joined online, we're grateful you're here too. If you have any questions or anything you would like to talk about in reference to today's conversation, feel free to drop those questions in the chat. We'll be monitoring the chat throughout the day, and we'll have some time at the end of the program to circle back on any of your questions. But now I would like, without further delay, to start getting into the meat of today's program. So I'll begin with our first question for our panel, which is, where and how did you learn to make jewelry, and what influences you as a maker? Whoever would like to start, feel free.
I'll go. I started making jewelry. I took a class in summer camp, so I must have been like 10 or 11. And one of the classes was jewelry making. And it was really basic. It was just wire, and we made rings. That's all we did was make rings the entire time. And it helped us with both of our hands and work with both of our hands. And I just fell in love with it because the year before I was selling mood rings as a little hustler. And the next year I was making jewelry and selling it. So I had to be like 11 or 12. And I caught the bug and really loved it. So yeah, that's when I started.
I love that. Go ahead, LaMar. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Trying to keep the noise low. If I can have that slide that I sent, it would be great.
Sure, give me just one moment.
But I can begin talking. First of all, the influence in my work as a storyteller and that journey in storytelling has been in many mediums. And as my mother, who is on the right in this slide, was a bead maker from the 1940s and was a heavy crafts person, I can say that her influence around me with crochet hooks, bead needles, all kinds of materials that were repurposed because she didn't believe in wasting anything, was my most avid and she was the encourager to say you can do it. So I would credit her. Along the way, I have been very fortunate to be exposed to people who, like Charnell Holloway, who she might not remember, but I was thoroughly impressed with her work that I saw in galleries that were exhibits by the National Conference of Artists. And one show in particular was Uncommon Beauty in Common Objects, where I learned that you could do things with metals I had never imagined. And so so she is one of my idols, you know, like if I could touch the hem of her garment, it would be great.
Oh, gosh.
So, no, this is not the butter up. This is the truth. Okay, so, and Joy Scott, who is the bead guru, was another of my influences. But I can say as a historian from the Museum of the National Center of African American Artists, where I met King Espelta and learned that he was credited with the first to smelt iron and iron ore from the earth. That was my influence in metals. And he was alive in 580 BC. So that Nubian influence for me meant a lot to the rooting of my practice and understanding metals. And last but not least, at the Museum School of Fine Arts, I studied with Yoshiko Yamamoto, who is a Japanese metal artist, and understood that there were 55 ways of treating metals that I would have to undergo. So that is a part of who I am and what I am, and then studying in Brazil, metals in Brazil. So those were my kind of influences and the history of reclamation of the African diaspora. Hey.
Awesome. Thank you, LaMar.
Well,
Oh,
I'll go ahead. Well, I'll go ahead, I guess. My first experience was back in the 70s as a high school student, forming and hammering wire jewelry, which was kind of popular in the 70s. A gentleman, Lovett Thompson, who made jewelry in a shop in the West End, encouraged me to try the medium. So later, in between, this was high school. Between high school and college, though, there was a program at the High Museum for young adults. And there was a jeweler named Tom Horan who introduced me to soldering and stone setting and that kind of thing. But, you know, I was still young. And he also introduced me to the concept of going to Georgia State for a degree in jewelry design and silversmithing. But he also warned me, saying that there was an instructor there that would funk you. a really demanding instructor named Richard Mathong. So I didn't go there. I went to Spelman.
Spelman and decided to go into life drawing. I had a choice between piano and life drawing. I had to choose life drawing because I had a performance complex, but into art with where my mother was teaching. And I decided, when it was time to graduate, I said, what am I going to do? Well, and then I remembered that it was suggested that jewelry design and silversmithing might be interesting. And I did like the medium. I was kind of scared to go, but after hearing all the stories, but I went there and it was a struggle, but it was the instructor was the kind that would not take less than your best work. And so we were taught many lessons, many techniques. He had a lot of folks come in and teach workshops, makubegani, metal inlay, construction, forging, all kinds of things. So that's kind of my story as far as how I got into it.
Well, now I got into jewelry primarily for self-interest. I must have been about 13 or 14. And I recognized that when my ears were pierced when I was an infant, that they did not pierce them evenly. So if I wore a hoop earring, one would hang like this and the other would hang like this. And I was furious because I was symmetrical. So why couldn't my earrings be symmetrical? So I didn't go anyplace except to the library. And I got a book on jewelry making. And I read through it and went and bought some supplies. And I was about 14 years old and I had a wood desk. And I decided I bought one of those can acetylene torches. No instruction from anybody, mind you.
Ooh, that was dangerous.
Well, I'm just going to make some jewelry. And it went along fairly well. I did learn how to do things and not melt everything up, and kind of was able to put things together. And then one day came when I had to move what was just one single asbestos plate off the desk. Well, I thought I would die because of course, there wasn't enough protection from the heat and the whole top of the desk had charred. But you didn't see it until you moved the plate. And so I put the plate back and I thought, oh my, this is going to be interesting, explaining to my family what happened to this beautiful antique desk. But that was in my teens. And then I went off and I took a silversmithing course, which I found interesting, but it was allowed. It was at a YMCA in Manhattan was corner of 53rd and 8th Avenue on the 5th floor. And when I walked in, people were in different stages of making things. So it was good for me because I could see what you could do with silversmithing besides bang and make a lot of noise. I saw a gourd-shaped teapot. I saw someone in the process of making a tray, someone doing some flatware. So I got to see what that was all about. And I enjoyed it, and so I decided jewelry is something I liked. It wasn't a long-range career plan for me because at that point, my agenda was I was going to teach art history on the college level. That was the plan. And I was making the steps to do that. So I went to Hunter College, New York, and I got a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree in accessory design with a minor in art history. And then I moved on to Teachers College at Columbia University. And I went there initially to study jewelry design. But for some reason, the one instructor who taught jewelry was Scandinavian trained. And my style, as it always has been, is kind of bold and funky. And we couldn't agree on what was valid. And my thing is, I wanted A's. I didn't want B's. I don't want C's. I want A's. And she wouldn't give me an A in jewelry. So I changed my major to printmaking. It's just wonderful. It was great. But I want you to know that when I took her for enameling, not jewelry, but that's how it goes. But so that was sort of my introduction. Although I must say I had an interesting experience when I was still in college, when I discovered I was invited to work at a show. That's all they said. It was a show by this African gentleman who was a trader. Well, it turns out the show was the New York gift show. Yes, I got invited and he couldn't pay me. So our trade-off was he could let me use a space in his room to show my goods. And at that point, I probably had 15 pairs of earrings that I could show. And I think that was where my interest in entrepreneurship really got generated, because here I am as a student making a part-time job, $3.75 an hour. In that 5 days at the gift show, I wrote $5,000. Yes, and it opened my eyes and I thought, oh.
I'll do it.
This is mighty, mighty interesting. And it also gave me encouragement to say that somebody besides me liked my work. And so I sort of stayed with it from there, but always it was kind of on the side. I was still going to teach art history, which I still love, but I didn't really commit wholeheartedly then because, while $5,000 was a lot of money, the major problem I had is financing this stuff, because money was an issue. We were not a wealthy family. How was I ever going to be able to do anything? So that's kind of how I got into it. But that introduction at the New York Gift Show opened the world that I didn't know existed. And I kind of kept that in the back of my head and to the side. And then things developed.
Oh, that's incredible. Thank you all for sharing kind of your entryway into this career. I always love hearing. I think it's something you sometimes fall into, or like one really incredible experience or one scary but amazing professor can really make a difference for sure. Okay, I'll move on to our next question, which is, could you each please describe some of the artistic concepts and or aesthetic elements that are present in your work? And if there are specific pieces you'd like to reference, just let us know and we'll share an image of them for our audience. But whoever would like to tackle that question first.
Well, I'd like to tackle that one.
Great, thank you.
I have always been an artist, and jewelry sort of flowed in and out. But I would say when I start to work in metal, I think of myself as a painter moving the metal around, letting it wrap and fold and tuck and bend and do all these wonderful things. And I operate with my work as metaphors. I'm always trying to show in 3 dimensions a feeling or a thought or an idea that someone may have. And people say to me, well, how are you influenced? As I walk down the street, I'm always looking around. Now, these 2 pieces, the necklace and the earrings and the brooch that are on the left, the Seraphina Collection, are the very first pieces of gold jewelry that was sold on the Home Shopping Network.
No.
Now, for me, they gave me no guidelines, just design some jewelry. And so with that, and knowing it was the first, my feeling, if you think about a hand going around someone to caress their back, that's where I got the idea, because I wanted a friendly piece. We were stepping into a new world. I didn't want any hard edges. I wanted something soft and welcoming and friendly. The circular pieces around the sides, I thought of as donuts because most people like donuts. And again, I'm on, it's a subtle level, welcoming, inviting, caressing. And while it was a very successful presentation, for me, it was very challenging. Now, the ring on the right, I did a few years later because several people who bought the entire collection on the Home Shopping Network wanted rings. The technique was different because the ring had to be done as a wax carving. Because as we know, you bang your hands up against things all the time. So you've got to have a solid piece. And I put some diamonds on it because a couple of the ladies had earring jackets and they wanted some sparkle. So I did that piece with it. Yeah. Now there is another piece. The wheel is on display at the museum also. Okay. The one up in the top, the wheel. What I was trying to do there was generate the impression of moving, though there are no moving parts. And I have pieces that move like the breeze down below in the center, because that is a front and back earring. The front piece of the earring you put on and through the air, and it's basically stationary. The back piece, once you attach it to the back, is free to move quietly. I have a thing about jewelry not making a lot of noise, especially around your ears, because you have to be able to think. And so those two pieces, along with a couple of other pieces that you may have, I'm not sure if you have the well, not that, Sarah, we can come back to Sahara, but there's two pairs of earrings, no, two pairs of earrings. Oh, well, okay. Well, what we could say here, the large hammered earrings, they're called spit curl, and they were hand hammered, which means you had a ball peen hammer that you hammered the front, you hammered the back to give it its kind of three-dimensional curve. Mm-hmm. Now, when it was first introduced, and I was already in the industry when that was done, the jewelry press called it savage, and which I found interesting. Mm-hmm. But it didn't stop me. I did many more pieces, did several collections with hammered gold. And it evolved and moved and became very, very interesting. Now the silver earring sets and necklace up in the corner, those are the Bialys. The Bialys, what can I say? It's one of my influences. It's a Jewish name for a Jewish thing that's kind of like a bagel. It's round. It has a depressed center with lots of sesame seeds, but it's very garlicky. And that was my interpretation of this food item.
Miss Sandy, you're making me so hungry. Between the donuts and the Bialy. I was thinking of vegetable cream cheese to go with it. Sorry.
Okay, but I've gotten a lot of inspiration from foods like with everything else. Mm-hmm. I had an earring called oodles because I was doing spaghetti one day, and you go, you're tossing, and it fell in the way, and I thought, oh, how can I interpret that in jewelry? And I did that as well. But the Bialy was probably my most favorite, and it's oxidized and the diagonal on all of them. But it was my interpretation of the sesame seeds. Just trying to replicate that, but it was etched, and then we oxidized, and that was pretty cool. But that's, I would say, my work most definitely is bold. I'm not, demure in what I do. And it's very wearable, and it's never heavy. Even though it may look voluminous, if you pick it up, you can wear it all day. You don't have to hunch over because things are too heavy. That's what I have to say.
Well, thank you, Sandy. I appreciate hearing more about kind of the concepts in your work, particularly. Oh, and LaMar. Hi, LaMar. I hope you won't be offended, but I couldn't wait to get into the questions. So I started, but welcome.
Thank you all still for being here. And things happen. I understand.
No worries. Well, I was just asking folks to describe some of the artistic concepts or aesthetic elements that are present in their work. We just heard from Sandy. I wasn't sure if anyone else wanted to share some of those things from their work.
You're on mute.
You're on mute.
Just trying to keep the noise down. Like Sandy, I have been included in works like 500 beaded objects. She was in 500 earrings. And I think that when we start our work, it's not necessarily to be famous. It is not necessarily to be known, but it is a passion. And from all of the artists who are here, I feel that passion and sameness in terms of grasping a concept, looking at a process, and making images. And so with my work, the principal medium that I work in is fiber. And so I began to then replicate whatever I could as a process in the metals by imagining it as fiber. And there were some even lace applications that I learned after I went to Brazil, where I studied lace making. And so this idea of aesthetic and appreciating an aesthetic that is about beauty and Blackness is a part of the work that inspires me as I study and look at what are patterns. When we think about fiber and we think about weaving and we think about the opportunity to then have a language of fiber that can be pronounced in beads and in metals, that was a part of my sojourn as I began to study the African cloth and kente and ashoke and other forms of communication through the language of fiber. And as I studied that, I saw simultaneous applications from indigenous people. And so this idea of being able to mix mediums, metal and beads, actually came from, well, my mom was always experimenting. So I began to experiment with that and say, what can I do here to celebrate our African diaspora, as I've studied works like what this work is speaking to is the Cameroonian elephant mask, and how that was in total beads, and it speaks to an 8-day week, an 8-day calendar in ancient Cameroonian society of coded language that is in actual life-size body masks in beads and dance for ceremonial reasons. And so you'll see different sections of this piece that are dedicated to the leopard and the fast movement of the leopard, and that of the elephant that would have you to go slowly, but remember. And so in this kind of way to have dialogue in the aesthetics of Black culture, it was an opportunity to do this kind of work and wear it and have others wear it. So as I began to study more and more about this idea of being able to present in glass and wire and beads, I was approached by the National Park Service to create an ornament for the White House. And And as I began to think about how could that best be done, it was with metals and beads. And it is now in the permanent collection of the White House as an expression of what it means to celebrate Black culture. So that was one of my things, one of the impetus to keep going. What you see here is a result of what I studied, not as a practitioner of candomblé when I went to Brazil, but understanding more about the pantheon of deities that are syncretized with that of the Catholic Church in Brazil, and seeing some of that and understanding what maybe pejorative color applications. On the right, you see a mask form with a knife and the colors blue prominent in that piece. And you would think of the deity of metals, Ogun, whose implements of war turned to that of farming, was a part of what I learned about the houses of candomblé that celebrated him as a deity that was transferred from the Yoruba and Angola on the African continent to Brazil. These retentions of memory were there. So I present them in my jewelry. On the left, you see a portrait with more Kente-like configurations on the side of it as another type of Ogun, or a very contemporary application of that sentiment. Next slide. And as I work in series and I uncover history, and slavery as a legacy has been one of my focal points, I began to think about creating a ship series so that we can remember. My work as a whole life work is called Save Me From My Amnesia. And in this ship series, there were particular ships that I was interested in, that I found. And one was the Desire, that came to Boston's Harbor in 1638, carrying the first documented Africans who were enslaved and had gone through the Middle Passage. So the piece of jewelry on the left, that work has the sun as a symbol, and beaded garnets as the beads for it, as the treasured Africans is my reference there. The one on the right is the Henrietta May, and the metal hammering that I did with the silver there creates a semblance of a mast of a ship. And so this series, and I think there may be more, this series is to evoke some thought about what it was to endure that Middle Passage, and our ownness to honor those and lift them that were lost in the water and those that arrived. And so the pearl at the bottom of the screen there is one that commemorates an 1848 moment of enslaved Africans commandeering a ship in Washington, DC, and then trying to get to their freedom. They get captured, but it was an attempt to do that. So many of you may be familiar with many more ships than I can count, because unfortunately that was what happened. In the top piece here, the one that you see called Moonwatch La Amistad is to think about what it was like when the Amistad Africans saw the moon above them as they mutinied on the ship of the Amistad. The Showa ship series in the bottom here, at the bottom image, has to do with those carpets that taught us geometry, the raffia aesthetic of the Kuba people, that has mathematics and a system of mathematics that the embroideries were used to teach children. And so this series is one that is alive and well, and in the Showa ships, one with black and white, there is an emblem that looks like a fan. That is my signature. And so in all of the beaded pieces, I'm able to sign them with that signature. But the influence is to have discussion, to be able to wear something that is emblematic of our reclamation and retentions with the mainland land of Africa.
Okay.
I'll go. I apologize because I completely forgot to send any other footage. So I think y'all only have like one photo. As per the introduction, I'm inspired by a lot. I'm inspired by nature mostly, and how unpredictable it is. And with my work, I love to do a lot of acid etching. It's either acid etched or it's reticulated. I do it very randomly. This particular piece was created by cuttlefish casting. So that top silver part is done by cuttlefish. And I just love the randomness of it. And I usually work around the piece, and I honestly do ask the piece what it wants to become. This is actually LaMar's stone, and so I knew I had the piece to work with. And with all of my other things, I'm really known for using Japanese jewel beetle wings, which have been used forever, for thousands of years. Oh, thank you. Yeah, there's more. Okay, thanks. I use Japanese jewel beetle wings a lot. I don't have a lot of color in my work, but when I do, it has to be something really unusual. And that also comes from Victorian mourning jewelry, which I love so much because I love death things. And I also just love it because it was an era where death was, it was there all the time. And it's not so distant like it is now with the industry that it has become. Only 100 years ago, we were doing funerals in people's homes. Or in your own home. That's why there are flowers at funerals, because the bodies would smell so bad. With that, with mourning jewelry, there was a lot of hair, but you didn't know what it was. Things weren't where they seem. So I try to work with, yes, real beetle wings. If I had a penny, I would quit jewelry right now. Yeah, they're real beetle wings. I get them wholesale. But yeah, I try to work with things that you wouldn't know what they are. So I work with like fish vertebrae. I have these turquoise corn that I got from a Second Avenue vintage shop. Oh, literally 20 years ago this summer. It wasn't opera thrift, but it was that little cluster of cool vintage shops that probably aren't even there anymore in Manhattan. But I just really pick up things that I find on my journeys. Huh? Oh.
I know it's hit or miss, but like they'll say, "Oh yeah, it's in stock." I know where it's not.
So yeah, and with I also like to collage my work. My other really big influence is ceremonial jewelry across the diaspora and Mesoamerica. If you look at it, it's like 2 or 3 shapes. And when I teach this to people about commercially successful jewelers who are also art jewelers, people had like 1 or 2 shapes, and they had meaning, but they also had like 1 or 2 shapes. So you don't have to, I feel like as a jeweler, as a maker, we sometimes overthink what the end process will be. And if you just set it down with that 1 shape, you can go wild. It doesn't have to be super matchy. I'm also come from a mass produced background. So sometimes I know what I think will work. Usually that's not the case. I think for all of us on the panel, I make what I like. Like, I'm wearing it, I want to make it, people like it, I sell it. That's pretty much That's how I make my money. But you know, I still make it even if people didn't. I'm just happy that it's a calling. So yeah, a lot of my work it's really nature inspired. I will go. I can't wait. I'll be in Memphis. I can't wait to go to the Botanic Garden and the Metal Museum. But the Botanic Garden, you will see me all up in personal, all up on the leaves. I have plants everywhere. The patterns of the leaves, the shapes, is just incredible. I mean, we have so much around us. And I'm also inspired by beetles, and in general and specifically, I've had that one beetle. I had a whole collection of other like boll weevils and stuff that I could maybe reintroduce now. I would preserve them. I would rehydrate them. I would get them dried, rehydrate them, and cover them in resin, and then put them on jewelry. I think it was a little too ahead of its time. I think I'm gonna try to come back to it. I think it's kind of cool now. People are, you know, into nature things more. But if you look on the backs of beetles, they have these beautiful markings, and it's just incredible. And they don't see that, you know. It's just one of those things. Cicada harvest. I'm in Chicago, so it only happens once every 17 years. When I lived in New York, I didn't know it was all the time. I didn't know it was all the time in a lot of places. Like, so I wasn't aware of that. It's been pretty great, but I actually haven't. I'm always in New York. So I got some cool little casings from that. You know me, I will collect. I have little cups. I will be on walks getting dead bees, any insect. It does not, trust me, it does not scare me. So yeah, I pull from a lot of things, and I think you can see that. But yeah, I love jewelry in general, and there's just so much. And I just love that you could learn one thing. You can learn how to hammer a piece of wire, and you could go crazy with that. You could just have one piece of wire and hammer that and have an entire career off of it. It's something about that you can't do with clothing, because I majored in fashion and have a degree in fashion from FIT. But I don't know. Jewelry's so forgiving too. But anyway, I can go on and on. But that's a little bit of my inspiration and how I use it with my work.
All righty. Well, the work that I have in the show are representatives of the three fates. And a lot of people haven't really paid attention to the word fate, or, you know, how that links. But yeah, I had seen a lot of visual representations of the fates, but they were usually represented as old hags or very scary women. I wanted to make sure that and then I thought, you know, maybe these were made up by men. Maybe these images were decided on by males. I said, no, three female spiritual beings that have so much power should look different. They should look more spiritual, more special, more. Anyway, I ended up, well, you know, when I started the repoussé technique, it was one of those frustrating experiences, because, you know, you have a flat sheet of metal that you hammer into shape. There we go. Flat sheet of metal. Thank you. That you know, you're cutting out, and you actually have to heat the metal up and hammer it from the front and the back. And actually okay, it's going, that's good. Okay, we'll see how this goes. This is cutting out the metal, cutting it out into a circle, because that's what fits into the die form. Now, this is a handmade die form. You know, they have hydraulic presses now that do this, but this is masonite layers with little screws that sandwich the metal in between. And the negative shape that you see actually has the part that came out of it is used to push through the hole in all of the layers. So actually after, screwing these whole things together, the screw goes all the way through all layers. And this is, me in my slimmer days using a vice grip to actually press the shape into the negative space. Now this is done now with the hydraulic press. That's wonderful. I can do this quicker now, but you start off with a smaller indention, and of course you have to heat things up because metal splits if it's not annealed before you try to manipulate it too much. So also using chasing tools and hammers to push out the form of the head. Now I have to make 2 of these because they have to have a front and a back of the head. And this is the pitch and a pitch bowl. Pitch is it's hard at room temperature. It has to be heated up to be soft. And this pressing it down into the pitch means that I can hammer without punching through the metal. So starting off from the back, I'm doing the eyes first. Yes, and I'm happy that my life drawing came into play here. The first doll that I did was it was for a toy competition. Everyone was doing some kind of toy, and that's what I tried to do, but it wasn't finished in time. Excuse me. But anyway, the constant heating of the metal to make sure you're not going to split the metal when you're hammering on it, and pushing it back into the pitch, and then working from the back, which is repose, and from the front, which is chasing. It takes a minute. I think the base usually takes about 3 or 4 sessions. Days. I'm pouring the pitch into the back so I can work from the front, and not punch through. So there are the eyes. And like I say, my life drawing really came in handy, so I could, but I had to figure it out from the back as well. And there's a way to work the pitch so that it's a certain hardness or softness for what you want to do. So that is the back of the work. And that's the front. So everything is hammered out. And fortunately, I did not punch through. that is the challenge with a piece like this. But working with the different metals actually have they have different consistencies. The softest metal, of course, is copper. And it was easier to, well, they all work, but there's certain things you have to get used to actually work with each type of metal, especially when you're considering the thickness of the metal as well. But what happens with the dolls is, I won't say doll figures, that I have to do 2 of those. One's for the front of the head, one's from the back. And it actually fits together like a box. So I have a lip on one side of, like on the back of it, and fitting it together, and then putting a screw down so that I can't solder it together because I have to put the hair in, right? So the hair, I decide that I will, you can't heat the hair and it keep its spring. So I end up having to drill holes in all the dolls' heads and threading the little hairs through and styling, which is fun. But trying to figure out what kind of hair, what kind of style. I decided on 3 different lengths, 3 different types. The one on the right, the hair is very heavy, but it swings really well. All of the hair is curled on a flex shaft with a wire sticking out of it, and hand inserted in all the little holes. In any case, I wanted to do 3 different types of metal to make this more of an international metal thing. I thought that if I had done it out of one metal, it wouldn't have shown the variety of personalities or races, if you want to call copper, silver, and brass race. I wanted to have more of an international feel. So anyway, she is carrying the spindle, and I don't know if you can see this thread. She has an actual thread of a little chain where she is the measuring one. And this one has the knife. I thought about doing scissors, but I thought knife would be more dramatic. And these are posable. The first ones that I created were not, they were just more like rag dolls with heads, hands, and feet made out of metal. I have an articulated skeleton inside of these, so they can be posed to a point. I'm still trying to work, trying to solve some other issues with that. But I did want to create 3 different colors of dolls, 3 different types of hair. And I did sew the clothes myself, and they are posed. I thought the posing was interesting. I like the one with the knife. She looks very dramatic. But like I said, there's an articulated skeleton inside, and the hands and feet are cast. And it was a challenge trying to figure out how to attach the head onto that articulated skeleton, which I'm going to improve on in time. But in any case, these 3 were the last trio that I did. The first one were the first 3 dolls that I actually created, and they were the same copper, silver, and brass. And they're on my website if you all ever get to it. I don't know, the posing is subjective because, and I don't know whether I need to go ahead and make them permanently posed in a certain way of make it available for people to pose as they see fit. But in any case, I just wanted to make a more familiar to me representation of what the face would possibly look like. The clothes are hand sewn. These yokes, this yoke has an etching. It does have a particular metal etching in. I don't know if you can see that. Beads around the neck. Anyway, so more of a personal, and actually am thinking about creating a series on the Furies, which are more dramatic female figures. I'm still thinking about that one. I have a lot of projects that I like to do, and I was put on hold for a minute there. I had a medical issue that took me out of things for about 2 or 3 years. Had a brain aneurysm, yes indeed, which I was a lucky person, but I'm I'm happy to have been in the right place at the right time and able to now teach again and create again. So, and I have a whole new perspective on life. So things are coming back slowly, and I'm really trying to figure out what kinds of things I can do for my students that, you know, will give them a little bit more excited about, you know, what they do. You know, most of the students I have in my class, and I know this isn't one of the questions, most of the students I have in my class are not art students, which, you know, is really interesting for me. A lot of them are science students or social science or physical science people, the majority of them. And I can kind of see why. Because it might be easier if you're used to doing a whole lot of research and a whole lot of experimenting and things like that. If you would get a chance to do creative work, then that would be, you know, what you want to do. On the other hand, if you're an artistic person and you're not doing that much technical work, you know, if you're the idea of learning some physics and learning some chemistry might not be as as you know, appealing. So I can see why, but it's very interesting. You know, I have students that are excited about what they're doing, but they're not our students. And I'm trying to figure out how to change that. That wasn't the question, I'm sorry.
Thank you for sharing, Charnell. LaMar, I'll turn it over to you to kind of take it from here with our remaining questions.
Okay.
Thank you, Dorothy. And I read through your introduction. Thank you again just for everything. I'm gonna move around a little bit with the questions. I just am curious from you all, what support, programming, or aid could museums and institutions provide to artists and scholars to continue bringing attention to the field of Black jewelry and metal?
Can't hear you.
I think I can respond somewhat to that part of that question. I think that as Black artists have always had challenges with being represented by Western artistic institutions. We have a constant kind of uphill climb, if you will, or whatever direction you want to call it. But succinctly said by Elizabeth Catlett in about 1963 or so, when she addressed the Negro Convention of Artists, she said that you will have to have your own galleries, your own museums, and your own spaces that you really create and your businesses in art to mount your aesthetic. In other words, that, you know, we would have to take that space. And so I think even from the Harlem Renaissance on, there were precursors to the Harlem Renaissance, but thinking about from the Harlem Renaissance on and the direction to intentionally embrace the art of Black people, for Black people, by Black people, has been a challenge to the institutions. To now that the pandemic of racism has come in, we can't produce enough of it, and we can't have enough say, and we can't have enough expertise to even answer some of the call for what we do. But it has taken like centuries, really, to get that kind of respect and certification, if we need that, from the Western world. As we, for us, by us, forge our own self-determined ideas in the aesthetic, including Black jewelry, we have this great foundation of the ancient aesthetics to look back on. And oddly enough, even as early as late as yesterday, most of what I was looking at in researching jewelry and ornamentation, most of the Western world as scholars start with ancient Greek history. They will mention the Etruscans, but where is this Nubia Kushite foundation that is in the northern part of Africa? And even over into Iran, they will say that this queen of Ur is one of the first to have gold ornamentation. And I think what we have as a major challenge is truth and founding what we do as as respect for the implementation of ideas in jewelry, the journey and the stories we tell, and the wearableness of it. I, for instance, have had a real influence now with pearls, but they're not the Barbara Bush variety of pearls. They're about some expression of who we are, and looking at Africans who were taken to places on these ships to unearth oysters to reveal pearls and talk about how that happened. But there is this recognition that we ourselves have to put forward and I salute the Metal Museum for its embrace of this show and the brilliance and genius of LaMar to bring that forward. Thank you.
Not to cut you off, but Lamerchi, all of you ladies have done it. Like, y'all just laid the groundwork for me to come in and just do a little woo woo wait. Gotcha. Anyone else want to respond? Sorry.
Can I add something, which has been a big, if you know me, I do like to complain, but I have solutions to things. The biggest thing is time and allowing Black makers and artists, especially jewelers, residencies. That is my biggest gripe. Applying for a residency is a whole job. And I'm hopefully I'm teaming up with my best friend, and hopefully we will have something a little bit, so hopefully something easier, because if I was in my 20s, I didn't have time. I had a full-time job, I had a part-time job, and then on the part-time, I was making jewelry and selling it. If somebody gave me $5,000, I need a little bit more now, but $5,000 in a month to just go somewhere and make, I mean, I'm where I am because I'm supposed to be, but I would have been there quicker if I had that, just a month. And we aren't awarded that. Especially because I didn't come in the art side. I didn't learn that at FIT. I didn't learn that working at all those places. Nobody mentions residencies from my background. So I kind of came into it late, where there are people who are, I have friends who are professional residence people. They jump from one residency to the other, and I'm happy for them, but also, you know, there's so many people and who don't get that opportunity, or their residencies where you get this time, but there's no money. How am I gonna get there? How am I gonna get there? There's nothing, you know, and it's always some place that's remote. I applied to something and then I had to take it back. I'm like, I can't rent a car for a month just because you don't have any service, so I can't get an Uber. And I think about all these things. So the things that are available that might be quote unquote easier to get, which I still haven't been accepted to a residency. You either pay for, you know, it's out of your pocket, which defeats the purpose. Because at least for me, if I close my shop, I'm not making any money and I can't pay my bills and I can't pay my rent. So, you know, there always has to be something monetary as well. And I feel like a lot of people on these boards who make these residencies, they're not artists. Or they're like really, like they're so out of touch. And I look at them and I read, and yeah, there's just some that I just don't even understand why people would even apply to them. But, you know, you get in, you take it, and then you just struggle and pay several $1,000s you might as well just go to a hotel and do that. So that's been my biggest like whine. If you see me on Instagram, that's mostly what I whine about is like residencies, because I need somebody people have been really nice to give me. I'll house sit, I'll water a plant, and I'll stay in your house for 2 weeks and carve some wax. I don't even need a lot. So it'd be nice to get some money though on top of that. But yeah, so that's my biggest thing right now.
We want to come up with some competitive or themed exhibitions of jewelry and metalwork, just to pull people, out of the shadows, so people can, observe, and actually meet. Because a lot of times, we're in separate parts of the country, and I don't even know some folks on your list. You have not even met them. So, it'd be nice to have, I think, themed exhibitions, have some kind of theme that people could compete with. Will bring a lot of folks out of the woodwork, and and have it on a college campus. Not necessarily a a museum would be nice, yes, too. Museums on college campuses or galleries on college campuses where you can actually get an audience that could relate with the work. I'm surprised at how many folks, when they come past my my jewelry class, they're like, "We have jewelry?" They, not the science people, but other folks are like, "Oh, because they have put me in the basement of the science building, which it is a scientific space, and that's where they had equipment. But it's interesting that only the science and social science and physical science folks are more cognizant of what could possibly happen with the jewelry. Interesting.
Well, no, I like Charnell's idea about the themed shows. I think it would be wonderful. Now, what's wonderful about this show is that there's an enormous range of creativity that's been shown. So for someone just starting, they can take a look at the show and say, and it's enormous, and it gives them a starting point. Mm-hmm. In terms of keeping our audience, the people out there who buy, appreciate, and love jewelry, I thought of themes like a string show, which is basically just assemblage. But the variety that could come out of that could be enormous. Mm-hmm. Or to do a show where people, the jewelry shown had to have stones. And you say semi-precious, precious, whatever you want to do, but let it be a stone show. Or do a show with metal and alternative materials. Let it be metal with plastic or some other materials that aren't beetle recyclable. The things that people find. And I think all of these things could generate far more interest in the category. Now, for me, I know when I decided to get into jewelry seriously, I knew that I wanted to sell jewelry to the world. And that's because I had gotten into the gift show, then I did the boutique show, then I got to Jewelers of America. Mm. And all of those shows said to me, wholesale, because to get into the stores,
that's right,
you've got to shows. But there was an obstacle even when I was in the show, because at the time that I was doing the shows, if you looked around at the people who came up and down the aisles and who were buying, mm-hmm. there was no one on the selling floor that looked like me at all. And so I had to be more innovative and adventurous in my approach. Like I got involved, say, with the Women's Jewelry Association and other organizations so that people, one, would know me, because if they know you and you're not just the face, there's some people who are not going to like you, which is okay. And then there are going to be others who say, oh, that's interesting. Come and do this with me or come and do that. And because of those kinds of involvements, I was lucky enough. I don't know if we have the images of them, but I had Consolidated Refining invite me to do an ad with them. They were new kids on the block in gold and silver material. And they wanted people to know that you didn't have to be buying 500 million ounces of something to get it. So they invited me to do the ad. And what was interesting for me, and I loved it, is I got to design the copy and plan the layout myself. Oh, I'm a director now. And it worked out very well because what I ended up calling the ad is seen in the most refined places, because it got the word refined in, it was gold, it was really beautiful. And I think we actually have that slide somewhere in the montage that's here. But that worked. Now, I was lucky enough to know a lot of photographers. And I remember one friend called me and said, I was going through so-and-so's file and I saw your jewelry. I said, yeah, really? And okay, yes. And one in the center was Consolidated Refining. Now, the earrings that are sitting in the top, that's actually a lens cap that I turned over and put the earrings down. The ones forward are again the stationary earring with the front, and the back piece is the mobile. But that ad really came out very nice and allowed me to be the director. Now, Julia Roberts got the picture. I had to pay the photographer for the photo. And I had that photo for about 2 weeks. Now, can't use her name now, because then I'd have to go back to her agency and walk over some really big bucks. And I'm thinking, how the devil can I use this picture? How can I use this picture? And one morning in the shower, it occurred to me, don't use her name. Well, whose jewelry is it? It's Sandy Baker's jewelry. And so, copywriter that I am, I did, have you seen Sandy Baker lately? And I made huge, it's like a 3 or 4 foot poster, and I put it up at a trade show. And you would be amazed at the chaos and the excitement it caused, because there were people who said, that doesn't look like Sandy. It's not. There were people who came and said, what? I don't get it.
Smart.
But it worked. It was so effective. It was one of the best trade shows I had, because here was someone who I couldn't mention, which I thought was fabulous. Now, on the far left, the World Gold Council, they were trying to promote the sale of gold. And so because I had gone to lots of meetings and popped around and people knew me, they said, oh, could you send us a few pieces that you think would be effective? And I said, oh, definitely. So in that shot, not everything is mine. The earrings, they're called knuckle earrings, those are mine. And the 2 cuffs on the top part of her wrist are mine. And that was that advertisement came out in, August. It was September, October, and November. And they ended up running it in several high-end magazines that I personally didn't even subscribe to at the time. They ran it at Town and Country, National Geographic. Oh my goodness, there were several others like that. But what it did for business was absolutely amazing, because here it was in a national ad. And if you were doing a national ad, you had to fork over dollars. I forked over nothing. I just scrambled frantically to make connections in the industry so that people would allow me enough credit so I could buy the gold, so I could do the production. Because at this point, I had a staff. I actually had a staff by the time I graduated from grad school. I had 2 people working for me. And it was like, okay, how do we go from here? Then I added a third person. Then I went to the Small Business Administration. And it was a little depressing because when I went to them for more money, they said, you need 3 years of tax returns showing a profit, and they have to be done by a certified public accountant. It was like, oh. So thankfully I had, established some credit in the industry with people like Myron Toback on 47th Street, who was kind of funny and remembered me from when I used to run up there as a hobbyist when I was 15, 16 years old. And I kept going and, we show up regularly. And for me, he was the first person. Myron of Myron Toback Incorporated was the first person in the jewelry district to offer me credit. That made such a world of difference, because when you don't have any money and you're working in precious metal, you are challenged. You are really challenged. And his extending credit to me allowed me to then seek credit from other people. And because they knew Myron, and what I found out later, that some of the salesmen who sold to Myron would then kind of track me casually to see where else I shopped, so that they could hopefully see the business grow enough where they could come directly to me and have me buy directly from them, because then their commission goes up. And it was just like, it's just this maze that you're working at when you're trying to be in the wholesale area. I remember going to Basel to do a show. And again, looking around, this time there weren't even security guards of color as they were at the New York shows. There was nobody else. It was me and my assistant. Now, I did make some inroads, but what I discovered is that one of the accounts I was after, meaning I had, shopped their stores, knew that they paid their bills, was Obempe, a German account. Now, I didn't write them in Basel, but when I came back to New York, I talked to some of my sales reps. Now, I mentioned sales reps because road reps are very, very interesting. And I've learned from my friends in sociology to pay attention to how people interact with people. At the time, most jewelry stores were owned by white people. And people like to buy from people who look like them. They sort of feel they know their lifestyle, even if they don't, but they think so. So to get over that hump, what I did for the most part is I hired all white salesmen. So if I'm at a trade show, it would be me and Charmaine and Lisa, oh my goodness, and several others. Now, I could be in the booth trying to make some sales. My picture is up on the walls because I was my least expensive model. So I was always the one that got photographed. And still, people would come up, look at the picture, look at me, and then look at one of the white people to say, now who's in charge here? And it was always interesting. And I would say, here I am, I'm Sandy Baker. But I knew if they made that mistake on their own, then I probably wasn't going to do business with them because they had a problem. But like I said, some people don't like you. I mean, I even recall this, I think the last couple of days I was talking to somebody and I said there was one account in the Midwest who never, ever contacted me directly. And I was always open and available to people. They would never contact me directly if they had a problem. they would only go to the sales rep. And of course, the sales rep has to call me, and then I have to call the store and say, well, you know, why didn't you call me? Oh, we just thought it would be easier to call them. I said, no, it's not easier. And with this one particular account, when that salesman left last year, you think we've had any conversation since then? No. Because, you know, prejudice exists. They didn't want to deal with me. They only wanted to deal with the rep. The rep has now moved to another state. And so for them, it was no longer worth connecting with me. And that's just how it is. There's nothing you can do about it. You just accept the situation and move ahead. You know, because my background, you know, I'm born in New York, but I was raised Caribbean, and my life experience sort of connects me to West Africa, where I have lived bi-coastally for about 15 years. So when I go to do things, I know who I am, and I arrive at a meeting, and I can't say that I actually take the black tag with me. I just show up. I figure they got eyes, they can see who I am. And I take my skill, my talents, and my expertise, and I go from there, because I'm primarily designing as a modern artist. That's what I do. I like to do what I do, and I present it to the world for them to choose and pick what they want. I was one of those people who opted out very early to not do custom.
So Sandy, when are you giving us the business course?
Always talk, my dear. I've got lots of ideas.
Yay.
Out how to navigate and move around, because I was passionate about jewelry and I wanted to be in this. And because I was the only one, I didn't care. Because you know, as a Caribbean, you're raised to know that the only professions that are important are doctor, lawyer, and educator, period. If you do anything else, you are the black sheep of the family. So me, my family, well, I'd say all of my family, my mother always supported me, but everyone else, nobody paid me much attention until I came out in a New York Times article, I think in the 70s, when they talked about women who had turned hobbies into business. That's when the eyes opened and they went, "You're in the New York Times. Oh my God. Oh my goodness. Oh, fantastic." Well, I'm still the same person. But I got more acceptance then. And so you just, you know, you do it, you accept it, and you just move along, because once you're in wholesale, you create other problems for yourself, even if you do wonderful work.
Yeah.
Because you want them to come back. You want a regular customer. And you know what the first word is, right? What have you done, you? What have you done lately? And so you're on this treadmill where you're constantly stepping and stepping and stepping. So when you look at my work, it's not on a straight line in terms of what I have done. For the first 25 or 30 years, I did only metal, no stones. And then color became the thing that had to occur. Oh, okay. And so when you look at more recent work, you'll see that I jumped into stones and putting assorted combinations together just because I knew they needed color. I also knew I wanted to be in business and be able to pay my bills, pay my rent, pay my staff, you know, keep my son in college. I was like, okay, we make some adjustments, but it's all been me. And I have loved every minute of it. Oh my goodness, I really have. And it's so good talking to all of you. It's exciting. This is just the absolute perfect conversation today.
Thank you. I just want to know if we can ask LaMar a question.
You can real quick, please.
Yes. In your bio, with your interest in archaeology and jewelry, how do you marry what you do with the kind of exhibit that you have put forward. Can you just give us some words about that? I know you have a talk coming up, but you know, that is really astounding that you are also a jeweler.
I appreciate you. As an archaeologist, I mainly do these two processes called scientific archaeology, but also experimental archaeology. Experimental archaeology mainly involves what we call historical reproduction, which basically uses historical methods by artists or creators from the past to not recreate their works per se, but to create works similarly to them. So it's not recreating like the same necklace that Tutankhamun had. It's more so using those skills to showcase to people what all went into creating that work. In my own jewelry process or practice, I'm reflecting on the fabricative methodologies used by different Black jewelers in the past. And that ranges from our connections to transatlantic slavery, where a lot of people are making these coin pieces with pierced objects they found, or reworking quartz or gemstones that they found in their local area. And more contemporary, modern era, it's looking into sort of how, or asking artists that are still living, how do you create your work? What processes or techniques have you used? Or even involving myself studying under artists in different parts of my life. So spending a summer month here, working under one artist, learning their techniques and skills, spending another summer month somewhere else, do a similar thing. I would definitely say I'm still in the infancy of that project. I wanted to take off more so when I get my PhD as my dissertation topic. But I'm sorry if that wasn't like a clear answer.
No, that was good. Thank you for that, because I studied silversmithing in Brazil, and I had to start with pebbles of silver and melt it with the copper and then laminate it all day with my arm going like that. So when I got back to America and I saw sheets of sterling silver, I rejoiced. Okay. So I am very, very appreciative of your process. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. Also, ladies, for one more question for you. First of all, I would consider myself the biggest fanboy of all your work. I love all your work. Y'all are fantastic. I know about your biographies. Y'all are great. But more generally, as a male approaching this work, I often feel like there's a large like male representation in jewelry. Like even in Black jewelry, we see Art Smith, but sometimes even larger in some cases, we see female jewelers operating, like Winifred Mason. What efforts do you think I can make or other scholars can make to ensure that there's a diversity in gender representation for Black jewelers and also just Black history overall, if that makes sense? I know you're all approaching the field from different angles, but really, like, even in terms of broader metalsmithing, we see a lot of male sort of dominance. How do we counteract that?
Oh, wow. Well, traditionally in from the continent, you have a lot of males who actually are the griots of the trades. So in that sense, there is that. But I think here there is there can be the possibility of, I don't know what the data reflects, but are you asking, I should be clear, are you asking if this field is male dominated, how can we get more females in, or are you asking it the opposite? What are you saying?
I would say I'm asking the first question. Like, I think the field is male dominated. And how can we get more female representation or make sure that no females are overlooked in terms of history?
Okay, so the hierarchy that is in America with males dominant at the top, and especially those of white racial backgrounds, are in charge of this industry, is what you're saying. Okay, I got it now. Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess it depends with education, because I graduated from FIT, and maybe half the professors were men and half were women, and the better professors were the women, hands down. And he would say that to the head of the department, who was a gemologist, never made jewelry before, and he would have always some backhanded thing to say, but the women would always show and teach, whereas most of the men jewelers, professors, weren't, they just, you would ask them questions and they would skip around, and it would just be like a work question, like, oh, how did you get into this? And they wouldn't answer because it was weird that they felt kind of threatened. And I went to my class was all women. It was one man and he had to drop out. So it's funny because we're there. I mean, not Black women. I was always the only Black person everywhere, even in professional. I hate that word, professional, but even in the industry, almost always the only Black person in the office. But woman-wise, the women we're there. We're just not either recognized or taken seriously, and especially not as a Black person. Like I usually don't even tell people that I make jewelry unless they bring it up, because it's thought of for women. Craft is a bad word, even though it's a skill set. It's time. It's history. But when you say craft, it's glue sticks, and no shade to people who use glue sticks. It's glue sticks and paper. Yeah, I know y'all know what I mean, but so I really don't say it, and I don't know if that's hurting or helping me, but it definitely starts with education. And I just taught last week a class of women who didn't know any of the people I brought up, and I tried to make it equal. It was men and women. So I started with Winifred Mason Chanette, did Art Smith, did Alexander Calder, a favorite, Harry Bertoya, and then went to super commercial, Liz Claiborne, because you don't think about, you think about her as jewelry, but not, she was more of a designer, but how that blew up, and just other women jewelry designers. So I think it's more about education, but you don't get that. I didn't get that at FIT. We learned more about the male professors and how great they were, and just like the basics of things. You really didn't have that much of an education, and it also depends on the art institutions. Has there been a big show about Winifred Mason Chanette? No, but there was an Art Smith show at the Brooklyn Museum in 2009. So, but there should have been something else on the other side, So there's also that, because I didn't know anything about Art Smith until I walked on over and saw that, and then fell in love. The same with Harry Bertoya. So that's also a really big thing. So with people like you, LaMar, going into this, there'll be hopefully more recognition. We just need more museum shows, more college shows, to force professors who probably wouldn't talk about it otherwise to take it seriously, and take Black makers seriously, and take our legacy and what we've done. And also because we've been erased, and there have been so many people inspired who take it and run away with it, like Picasso. That's there's so many, but I'm not gonna get on my Picasso rant. But there's just been so many people who can get inspired, because there's so many anonymous makers from the continent and just from all over the diaspora who don't have a signature on the back of any of their work, because it was just made for whomever, and not in a bad way. So it's about basic education, and I proselytize all day about it. Or pontificate. Both. I do both. So yeah. It's about getting the word out, and educating people, museum and college museums too, if possible.
I think it's also about support. Can you all hear me? Oh yes. I noticed that when I'm teaching males and females in the studio course, in the few years after they graduate, the women seem to disappear. The men seem to still continue with their art careers, but the women, of course, they will have kids. They will be, taking care of kids and family, and they don't have the same amount of time as the males would, because the males are usually supported by their wives. And it's that has been the case with me growing up anyway, and watching all the students and noticing that the female artists, they kind of drop off, but some of them are able to bounce back. But you know, it depends on support. Like when they finally decide on their mates, and their mates feel like art is not a real job, or you need to be cleaning the house or raising the kids, you don't have time to, you know, it's a little of that, you know. So it's interesting, like just like who was it Pollock and Krasner? It's like no one knew about Krasner because she was supporting Pollock the whole time. She was a good artist too. So you know, it's a lot of gender issues that go into whether females can rise to the occasion. You know, they're caregivers. They take care of the family, and that has been the case. Now things are changing, but I'm saying that is from my perspective. I see a lot of talented women kind of drop off to the side just because they're raising families, and families are important. It's just that, you know, you don't see the same kind of drop off with the guys. I don't know. It's just this is my perspective from teaching at a female college next door to an all male college. Okay.
Well, I personally would like to see the mindset of women changed so that they start thinking about what they want to do and how they're going to do it, and not let the fact that they are people of color, how can I say, let them not see, forget barrier, hurdle. Let them see it and know they either go over it or go around it. Because I know when I was growing up, I didn't really think about the word minority until I had to fill out college applications, and there was a box that they wanted you to check. And all the while I was growing up, and even now, when I think minority, I can be in a minority of one, that's fine. But I am not a minority. And I think it's a fine line. And if women start thinking about it the same way, then they will be more adventurous, because they will have broken out of the box that they themselves have put themselves in. You have to be daring, there's no doubt about it. But like I said, that word minority, that is one that challenges thinking, change the mindset.
I also think that there is the familiarity of jewelry being so close to us that we think that there are enough creators out there already, or it's being manufactured by Rainbow, or it's being put in places where, you know, who is going to buy my custom piece when, you know, the satisfaction of wearing a piece of jewelry may not be the top thing on my agenda as a treasured object. Am I seeing myself as a possible maker as we look at this century as the maker revolution? Do we think about, as women, being able to occupy a space that is so critically challenging at this time because of the innovation in production, the mass production that is there? Where is the lapidary science for us that we don't even know exists? I didn't know the word lapidary till I saw a lapidary magazine. I'm just going to be honest about that. And then began to look at that and saw no Black representation in there whatsoever. I'm sure it exists. And then, you know, looking at some of the people that I knew from some organizations of Black artists that could do this, teach it as a science, but not ever being recognized as worthy of being in a magazine like that. And so I think I agree with everything that you all have said in terms of support and resources, education, and taking the will to step out on it. But most of what we do is associated with its availability and access. And so women who are looking to have careers that are readily paying you right away has a lot to do with the immediate need. And so once again, that hierarchy comes into play with respect to where we are economically and what labels our opportunity. And to be able to step out against that and take the risk is another thing. Most artists work the work. That's real for us, unfortunately. So I think once we can maybe make some steps and solutions toward creating guilds that will help support women getting into the jewelry business, or people who would be have some obstacles more than others in participating in this industry as it has been. Yeah, there's that. Because we have to recognize that most of the resources for jewelry and jewelry making came from a paradigm of theft, if you will, and slavery. And so, yeah, education is what we're going to have to do. Thank you.
Wow, thank you all so much for all of the thought and, perspective that you all are bringing to LaMar's questions, in particular that last one. There was a lot of powerful things said, so thank you all so very much. I just jumping in to say, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I think our conversation we've gone over. I would love to keep all of you here just to go through the rest of our questions, but just to be respectful of your time as well as our participants. I might offer one question that came in our chat while you all were speaking that I think really Lamerchi's last comment segues into perfectly. But someone chimed in and just asked for any tips for someone who wants to get into jewelry making and even took classes in college, but struggles to make their ideas into a reality. If they make a design, is it better financially to get someone else to make it, or should they spend the money on trial and error? And again, I hate to do this, but I'll give you each maybe like 30, 45 seconds to respond.
I'll go first. It really depends. If you really like making things over and over again, then do it that way. Time yourself, so price your things accordingly. And even if you never sell wholesale, make sure that you have a wholesale price, AKA don't sell something for $15, even if it took you 2.5 seconds to make it. Just think that you would have to wholesale that for $7 or less if your markup is different. So yeah, that would be, I would say shop the market too, go to Macy's, go to some kind of department store and see what's out there, and then maybe try to go to a craft thing and see what direction you want to go in with your work.
I say trial and error. You learn so much when you make mistakes, and they might be expensive mistakes, but you do learn from them. Yeah, just set a limit as to how much you're willing to lose. I say go for it. After you do your research, of course. Like was said before, go to shows and see what other people are doing and how much they're charging and how long it takes to make. Talk with the artists at the festivals and see how they are creating their work and charging. But yeah, try it. I mean, you won't learn anything unless you try.
Right.
Just
our greatest asset is curiosity.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And being willing to research, spend a little time whatever that time is, you can carve out an hour a day to invest in finding out and then move from there on a real deal.
And be honest with yourself. Decide, do you really want to have to make that piece over and over and over again? So someone comes to you and says, okay, I love it. I want 100 of them. You want to make it? Maybe yes, maybe no. But I think initially, making it yourself and knowing all the pitfalls and things that can come up in the process is good for you as an artist to know these things can happen.
Yeah.
But then you have to choose what's comfortable for you. And then you take that plan and you stick to it. But again, that research, that background information is critically important. Because if someone had told me years ago that, you know, that somebody would even want 100 of something I made, I don't know if I would have been all that excited at the time. Because the first
Personally,
time,
I would also say do.
it's okay. No, it's all right, LaMar. I mean, but things like this happen, and you sort of, I say, before you make the career, decide what avenue you want to go on, so that you can best make the choices. But trial and error and learning, oh darn, if you do that, that doesn't work. The more information you have under your belt, the better it is, even if you have to have someone else make it, because you know when they're talking to you, if they're talking straight truth or talking out of the side of their face. Okay, you'll be much wiser. Choice.
I would also echo everything everyone said and also say do like a cost benefit analysis of what you're trying to make. I remember when I first worked with gold, I thought it would make more sense for me to work with it versus sending it to someone else. I get all the access that comes off of it. And I'm just not losing any material that way. But when I first started making jewelry when I was in high school or just younger, I didn't realize how technically intensive it is. So I always wondered why jewelers never have like acrylic nails or don't have like really like polished, buffed up everything all the time at least, or when they're in their workshop. It's because it's so labor intensive to make jewelry. So I think it's thinking about if that's something you want to do. I know I'm a person who likes a good mani-pedi, so I don't do it all the time. I have my carved out times.
Okay. All right.
Love it. Thank you all so much for sharing and giving some input on that question. I thought it was really relevant. There's some awesome advice. So thank you all. I apologize we won't be able to get too many of the other questions that were sent in, but everyone's given us a lot of food for thought. I'd like just to kind of wrap up and conclude things today by thanking you all again for joining us. Special thanks to Sandy Baker, Alicia Goodwin, Richie Frazier, and Charnell Holloway for sharing your time, talents, insight, perspective with us. And thank you to LaMar Gayles as well for facilitating this incredible conversation, as well as, doing the work that you're doing with Divine Legacies and Black Jewelry. I'd also like to extend a heartfelt gratitude to our incredible donors and members whose support makes programming like this possible. And if you're interested in supporting our programming or joining as a member, we'll throw some links in our chat for you to be able to do that and be a part of our team. Also, there's a link in the chat if you're interested in seeing more of the artwork in this exhibition. If you're not able to make it to Memphis before the exhibit closes on September 12th, to see it, there's a link to the webpage for the exhibit on our website, and you can take a tour using Prezi and see all of the incredible artwork. Also, if you are interested, we have been lucky enough to produce, with help from the Center for Craft, a catalog to accompany this exhibition. It's available for pre-order now on our website. Again, that's linked just through the Metal Museum. You can go to our online store to be able to take a look at that, or do it through the exhibit webpage itself. But after all of that plugging, I just want to thank everyone again for tuning into today's artist panel in conjunction with the exhibit Divine Legacies in Black Jewelry. We hope to see you all at the museum very, very soon. So thank you all so much for tuning in today. Much appreciated. And thank you, panelists and LaMar. This is amazing.
Thank you all again.
Thank you. That was fun.
So lovely. Thank you. Great.
Take care.
Thank you for
Okay.
having us.
Everyone, enjoy your afternoon, your evening, and we'll talk to you soon.
Great.
You.
Bye, everyone.